And everyone can see Sarah right at the top of her screen. Sarah Young.
Hey, Hadi.
Hey, good morning.
Morning.
I'd like to get out of my office because we have a watch party, which is next to my office. And we have a bunch of agents in there having fun because I think some of them is the first time they actually been seeing a human being live and, seeing their coworkers and associates in the office. So this is really exciting. And we have a watch party going on in all our offices. But I didn't expect to see all these people coming today. So anyway, I had to go to one of our empty offices in the back so that I won't be kind of a lot of noise, but in background noise. So anyway, good seeing you, Sarah.
Good seeing you too. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited about this. I've been kind of the last week or so, maybe actually 2 or 3 weeks, been traveling to different offices, and we talk a lot about the market and what's going on. And of course, as you and I both know, real estate agents are not much into politics and what's going on behind the scene. And, I just got involved with the NAR and became a major investor probably about 8 years ago. And I wasn't aware of all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes. So I'm really excited to have you talk a little bit about what's going on. But some of the things that I wanted to share with some of our agents was, as I traveled to different offices, and as you know, this market is a very unusual market. I don't want to call it crazy because I've been doing this for 30 some odd years and I've seen crazy. This is not crazy. This is, I wish the market was like this when I got into business in 1981, 82. It was like 14, 15% interest rates. We had inflation, we had everything you can think of. But unfortunately, we have a lot of realtors in the business, which a lot of them shouldn't be in the business. And I see a lot of complaints from our agents that have to deal with agents that are not experienced and don't know what they're doing. And they basically have to carry their work. So I'm an advocate of trying to get our standards to become a realtor, make it a little bit higher. So that's one thing that's no secret. Most agents that are in our company know about that. But the thing that I was going to share today, I was at the gathering of the Eagle conference and in Colorado Springs 3-4 weeks ago, and I talked to Steve Murray for some lengths, and he's an expert basically in our industry. He's the one that, if some of you don't know, he was the one that founded RealTrend, and I asked him, I said, what do you think the market is going to be like in the next couple of years? Nobody has a crystal ball. But what's obvious is this market is going to stay strong for at least the next couple of years. Beyond that, nobody knows. But he's thinking that this market is going to be strong for the next 10 years because we have, according to him, 5 million homes short. With the COVID, a lot of the builders stopped building. The price of material and all kind of labor, everything went up. So it's going to be very interesting to see what's going on in the next couple of years. Now, one of the things is a lot of agents were asking me, what we're going to do about lack of inventory. There are a lot of buyers that work 10 times as hard to sell a house. And my comment to them was really what everybody's been saying, but a lot of people haven't listened, is look at your database, look at the houses, the clients that you've dealt with several years ago. A lot of them probably don't know how much equity they have in their home. Their life circumstances might have changed. And when I say changed, the kids could have moved out, college, and they might have $500,000 in equity, $300,000 equity. They had no idea. And this is a good time for them to make a change and sell. So I think it's our job to really not just sell a house and forget about it. I think it's important for us to be in touch with some of those past clients and things changes, and to see if their circumstances change, if they are interested in possibly change their resident or moving or whatever the case might be. So I encourage you to do that. So we have a very, I guess, full program today, great speakers, and I'm really excited to have Sarah. I'm going to give you a little bit of biography on Sarah because I've known Sarah for some time. I'm wearing my pin, by the way, today, the NAR. You know, I'm trying to encourage 100% participation, you know, and it's very hard to get these agents know what you guys do behind the scene. I think when I talk to some of the agents, they complain about what they pay, all the money they're paying, what they do for us, what's MLS doing, what our association is doing, what NAR doing. They have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. So Sarah is the Director of Real Estate Services and Policy Oversight at the National Association of Realtors in Washington, D.C. Sarah works on federal legislative and regulatory policy strategy for NAR, staffs NAR's public policy coordinating committee, and serves as a liaison to senior executive at large residential real estate firms and their affiliated mortgage companies. Previously, Sarah covered policy issues for NAR, including technology policy, FHA mortgage, insurance, VA home loans, and rural housing program, as well as valuation issues. Prior to joining NAR, Sarah worked as a budget analyst for the Fairfax County, Virginia Office of Management and Budget, and as a professional staff member for the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Financial Services. A native of Chicago area, Sarah received her BA from Hamilton College and a Master of Public Administration from Maxwell School at Syracuse University. Here you go, Sarah, you're on.
Wonderful. Thank you, Hadi, and thank you for having me today. This is great. I love the opportunity to get out and talk to our realtors across the country. So this is a wonderful opportunity. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, make it a little easier to follow along with some of these issues that we're working on. Okay, can you see that all right?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So just to give you a little bit more background about where I work at NAR. So I work in our Washington, D.C. office. I am on NAR's policy team. So we are a team of policy experts that manage over 40 issue areas affecting the real estate industry. So this ranges from mortgage finance, environmental issues, tech policy, insurance, fair housing, tax policy, you name it. We work on a lot of issues on your behalf. And so we're responsible for developing an advocacy agenda on federal, legislative, and regulatory policy every year. And we do this with our volunteer members. So it's the volunteer members that set the agenda for the year. And we do that through 15 policy setting committees. And so once we have that policy agenda, our policy team of experts can work closely with NAR's lobbying team to educate both Congress and the administration on NAR's advocacy priorities. And so our team also does research on hot button issues to help support our advocacy activities. We work closely with industry coalitions on shared interests. And then I specifically manage NAR's large firm outreach program as part of the policy group. And that is an advisory board of about 40 CEOs from the largest residential real estate firms across the country. So Hadi sits on that advisory board, which is how we've gotten to know each other better. And that program is wonderful because it's a great sounding board for our advocacy team to ensure that we're advocating on interests that are of importance to running your businesses. So I picked a few issues that we've been working on that have been hot. You've probably heard a lot about them in the news. So, and before I get started, I put my email and my contact information on this slide. I'm going to share these with Sarah after the fact. So they have hyperlinks to all the information that I'm going to talk about today. And then at the end, we'll leave about 5 minutes for questions. So I wanted to start with infrastructure legislation because this is something that has been a huge focus of Congress over the last several months. The House and the Senate have been negotiating on this large infrastructure package, and they've been arguing about how it gets paid for and how it will get passed. So luckily, lately, a bipartisan group of about 20 senators have come together to try to work with President Biden on how to find investments in the infrastructure that they can all agree on. So right now, the bipartisan plan that's out there is a $600 billion compromise for roads, bridges, rail, airports, water, and broadband infrastructure. But this package does not include some of the other non-traditional human infrastructure proposals that you may have heard about in the news. And these are items like childcare, education, prescription drug pricing, climate change issues that are really important to Democrats. So Congress is considering passing two packages. One would be this bipartisan, more traditional infrastructure plan, and then another one would be the more human infrastructure plan. The human infrastructure plan, though, because it doesn't have bipartisan support, would need to go through a more partisan process called budget reconciliation. You may have also heard this in the news. It's very complicated, but something that's used to pass priorities when you don't have bipartisan support. So last week, to make progress towards passing this human infrastructure plan, the Senate Budget Committee agreed to a budget resolution with instructions for $3.5 trillion. So they'll take that money and they'll divide it into specific spending buckets and give instructions to all the different committees about how to put together a package. Because we don't have a whole lot of details on this plan yet, there are some more moderate Democrats that are not yet on board. And you might know that the Senate right now is split 50-50 Republicans and Democrats. So the Democrats really can't afford to have anyone dissent to pass a bill like this. So where is NAR on all of this? Well, NAR does, not surprisingly, support infrastructure spending. We have strong support for investing in all types of roads and bridges and even some of this human infrastructure as well as housing. But we have strong concerns about how to pay for some of these investments. So you may have heard about some proposals that would reduce tax benefits for real estate to try to pay, especially for some of these human infrastructure type investments. So especially troublesome to NAR are any proposed limitations on the use of 1031 like-kind exchanges, any increases in the capital gains tax rate, and what appears to be a proposal to tax unrealized capital gains of debt for owners of properties with assets above certain levels. We feel like all of these proposals would negatively impact the health of especially the commercial real estate market and negatively impact affordable rental housing. So what is NAR doing about this? Well, we have been extremely active. We've been meeting regularly with members of Congress. We wrote a letter to Treasury Secretary Yellen. We've also met with high-level officials at the Department of Treasury as well. We communicated with the National Economic Council, Domestic Policy Council, and we are also collecting stories specifically from members on 1031 like-kind exchanges. You'll see the link to the story bank here if you want to participate. And this is just another way for us to illustrate to the administration and members of Congress how important these tax benefits for real estate investments are. But good news is we are making some positive progress on the issue of 1031 like-kind exchanges. We're hearing that fewer and fewer Democrats do support using that as one of the pay-fors for the larger bill. So another thing that we are doing is investing in research to support our advocacy efforts, like I mentioned before, and you'll see a link to all of the resources that I'm talking about. So this year, NAR commissioned new research with a group called the Rosen Consultant Group. They're a very esteemed outside research consultant that we've used in the past. The research that they did for us recently was released last month, and it's really going to help our advocacy efforts about educating on the important investing in housing as infrastructure and why taking away tax benefits for real estate investment would only worsen the problem. And I know, Hadi, you talked about supply issues. That is extremely important to us right now. We want to be a leader in the discussion on supply. So just to give you a few stats from the report that I thought you might find interesting. So the report shows that the number of housing units for sale is at its lowest in almost 50 years. And this is given the vast scale of underbuilding and lack of residential investment over the past 15 years. And unfortunately, this prolonged shortfall in housing construction and renovation has translated into $4.4 trillion in lost economic activity. So the report suggests that we would need to build 550,000 additional new homes per year for the next 10 years to try to make up for this gap. So the report generated a lot of interest, especially given all of the reports in the media about this red hot real estate market. You're hearing stories of people, multiple offers, offering way above list price to try to be successful in purchasing a home. So the report was picked up by the Wall Street Journal, several other media outlets. And so to follow up on the momentum of this report, we hosted a virtual policy forum last week. So we invited the author of the report to present, and then we followed up with 2 expert panels talking about solutions for undersupply at both federal and state level. So if you're interested in that report or reading more about what we're doing, you can also watch the policy forum, which is recorded at the link on the screen. So just shifting gears a little bit, I wanted to provide a few other examples of things that we're working on that are impactful to your businesses. So one is the Secure Notarization Act. So the Senate and the House both introduced the Secure Notarization Act, and this is bipartisan legislation which would permit the immediate nationwide use of remote online notarization. And NAR has been very supportive. We've been working through a coalition on this initiative. These bills are nearly identical to legislation that we supported in the last Congress. So for those of you who are familiar with this technology, with RON, the notarial documents are signed, stamped, and tamper-sealed electronically. Whereas in some states during the pandemic, to try to address this issue of not being able to meet in person, some of you may have used a process known as RIN. So that's remote. I hear an echo. Did you all hear that? Really good. Okay. So with remote ink notarization, which some of you may be familiar with, the paper closing package is delivered to the borrower. And then the notary would use a webcam technology to examine the borrower's government issued ID, witness the borrower ink signing the documents, and then the borrower would return those documents to the notary via mail, and then that notary would apply their sign to those paper documents. So there are some states that are attempting to codify RIN rather than going a step further and passing a RON law. Our preference would be to use RON. We feel like RIN is a good stopgap, but to really bring our real estate industry into the 21st century and make it more efficient and secure for borrowers, we feel like RON is really the way to go. And we'll continue to work on that closely. Another issue that's really hot right now is the Cdc Eviction Moratorium. I'm sure you're all aware of this, read about it in the news. On June 24th, the CDC did extend the eviction moratorium. It was previously set to expire on June 30th, but then they extended it through July 31st, 2021 to give renters a little bit more of a cushion. So what the eviction moratorium does is it prevents housing providers from evicting tenants who are unable to pay all or some of their rent due to loss of income or due to medical expenses. And there's some other criteria as well that a renter would meet to be able to be eligible for this eviction moratorium. NAR was disappointed by the extension of the CDC eviction moratorium. We believe that it's no longer needed at the national level. We've been an active leader in a real estate coalition devoted to working with Congress and the administration to find a better solution for tenants and housing providers who have suffered financial losses due to COVID-19. We were instrumental in securing almost $50 billion in federal rental, emergency federal rental assistance, and that would help tenants pay their back rent and then help housing providers maintain their income so they can pay their mortgages and maintain their properties. So the Georgia and the Alabama Association of Realtors did successfully challenge the CDC eviction moratorium in DC Circuit Court earlier this year. The court did agree to vacate the moratorium after finding that the moratorium exceeded the CDC's powers. However, they stayed the ruling to give the DOJ the option to appeal. The plaintiffs took it to the Supreme Court, who allowed for the moratorium to stay through July 31st, but a majority of the justices noticed that the CDC lacked the authority to implement the ban in the first place. So I know that's a mouthful, but the point being, it's unlikely to see the CDC eviction moratorium extend past July 31st. I think there are some fears that would go on and on and on. So as we get closer to the deadline, you're probably going to see a lot of articles in the media about the fate of renters and is there going to be an eviction crisis. So NAR is doing a lot of work to try to proactively educate people on the resources that are available. You'll see we have a link on our website, Coronavirus Housing Providers FAQs, and this talks a lot about how housing providers can apply for rental assistance on behalf of renters to try to get that process accelerated. So in addition to fighting for stabilization for both property owners and renters after the pandemic, NAR is also closely monitoring homeownership stability. NAR also helped secure almost $10 billion in relief for homeowners experiencing a hardship during the pandemic. And we are working also closely with the federal government to ensure that these funds are also distributed in a timely manner. Obviously, every state does things a little differently. So just trying to get them to really work closely. I know they've got an interagency task force going on right now, but it's just really key that we get these resources that we work so hard to pass into the hands of people that need them. So similar to what we did on the infrastructure research, we also sponsored research with a couple of outside groups to recommend policies to protect homeowners and preserve homeownership coming out of the pandemic. So it's going to be really important that we prevent unnecessary foreclosures and home loss. We want to make sure that we're protecting access to credit. We want to ensure that vacant properties do not blight communities. We want to level the playing fields for owner occupants to purchase homes. In this way, we really feel like we can prevent COVID-19 from devastating homeownership and really undermining racial equity in the housing market as well. And so that leads me into another issue that has been very important to NAR over the last couple of years, and that is fair housing. So many of you might know that last year we launched a new Fair Housing Action Plan. It's abbreviated ACT, and that emphasizes accountability, culture change, and training. And the point of this program is to really double down and ensure that America's 1.4 million realtors are doing everything possible to protect housing rights in America. So I'm sure you've probably heard a lot about this, but just to give you an idea of a couple of the initiatives that we're working on, one of which is enhanced fair housing training requirements that hold real estate agents accountable for their fair housing obligations. We have a state-of-the-art new training called Fair Haven. If you haven't already taken it, you can find it on nar.realtor. We've also launched a public service announcement campaign that reaffirms NAR's commitment to fair housing. We've actually won some awards for this amazing campaign. And then lastly, we are looking at the possible creation of a voluntary self-testing program in partnership with a fair housing organization as a resource for brokers and others who want confidential reports on agent practices so that they can really address their own problems. So we have also built up our policy team expertise by bringing on 2 staff persons that have dozens and dozens of years of experience in fair housing policy at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And they've been working closely with the policy team on issues related to racial equity. NAR has also been a part of the National Housing Conference's Black Homeownership Collaborative that recently finished a 7-point plan to increase Black homeownership by 3 million households by 2030. And I put some points about this plan on the slide that you'll see, as well as a hyperlink to that 7-point plan if you're interested in learning more. This plan was the work of over 100 housing leaders in every area of housing advocacy in DC. So we worked over 2 years, hundreds of hours of meetings, and we addressed unique challenges in areas like mortgage lending, housing production, counseling and down payment assistance, civil and consumer rights, and marketing. And so this plan provides some detailed recommendations for changes that would help contribute to moving the dial towards the creation of these 3 million net new Black homeowners by 2030. So the plan was launched publicly in June by HUD Secretary Marsha Fudge, as well as Senate Banking and Housing Committee Chair Sherrod Brown. And my boss, Brian Green, who many of you may have met, he's NAR's Vice President of Advocacy, also spoke at the event. So that leads me into some of the work that we've been doing also with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. As I'm sure you've probably read, the Biden administration is very, very focused on fair housing and equity issues. The CFPB is responsible for fair lending. And so you'll see in a lot of comments out of the CFPB since the beginning of the year that they're really going to be so focused on fair lending. Earlier this year, the acting director said, quote, "Practices and policies of the financial services industry have both caused and exacerbated racial inequality. So the CFPB is committed to elevating and expanding existing investigations and exams and add new ones to ensure they have a healthy docket intended to address racial equality." So as Hadi mentioned in the very beginning when he introduced me, as part of my large firm outreach work, I also staff a group of mortgage affiliates that are associated with our large residential real estate firms. We work with a great outside consultant, and we talk to them a lot about sort of the regulatory environment in DC and the things that they should take into consideration. And so one thing that we've highlighted this year are just consideration and fair lending, some best practices that independent mortgage companies should really take into consideration to make sure that they are in compliance. So some of the best practices include all lenders should have a written fair lending policy. Senior management should review HMDA data regularly. Companies really need to advertise the majority minority census tracts. We've seen some independent mortgage companies actually receive enforcement violations or enforcement actions for not advertising. So this includes direct mail, billboards, website content, etc. And then lastly, really having a clear policy for pricing exception policies. And we've actually gone into depth as to what that might mean for the different companies. And the reason this is important is because there is the possibility that the federal government will reopen what's called the Community Reinvestment Act. And these are exams for depository financial institutions, so banks. But they're really looking at applying some of these regulations also to non-bank financial institutions, like the independent mortgage companies that a lot of you work with. So, it'll be important that these institutions can show that they are taking proactive steps to consider issues related to fair lending, or you could get swept up in those rules that are going to be open potentially soon. So I know that's a lot, but I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the things that we are working on that impact your businesses. So that's the conclusion of my update, but I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. And like I said, since this is a lot of information, you might want to take some time to look through the slides, click on the links. If you have follow-up questions, my contact information is also in there. You're welcome to call me or email me anytime. So I will stop sharing my screen.
Usually agents, as you know, Sarah, are very shy on camera. So they might put some question in the chat box. But I was going to ask, and I think I emailed you about that. Since the Department of Justice, DOJ, has pulled out of that agreement, what's the game plan here?
So we are working closely with our legal department to consider what our next steps will be. So I'm actually still waiting for an update from legal on that. Obviously, I think if you've seen in our communications, it was a surprise. Right after they pulled out of the agreement, there was also an executive order that was released by the administration on competition. And this is a wide-ranging executive order that touches many, many different businesses across the country. So I think we're working closely with our peers in the industry and with people that we know in the administration to better understand what industries they're prioritizing and where their focus will be, and sort of where real estate falls in that priority list. Because it's so wide-ranging, if they did everything, it would take them years and years and years, hundreds and hundreds of staff hours. So stay tuned. I'm hoping, Hadi, by the time we all meet for the RES Advisory Group meeting in September, that Katie Johnson, our General Counsel, will have more updates for us on that.
Okay, that's good, because I think a lot of the agents, when I was on the road, were a little bit concerned about what's going on. I mean, most of them don't know anything about the DOJ, believe it or not. They don't know what's going on behind the scene. But I think a lot of them are concerned about the companies nowadays, that you have all these different internet companies that are not a member of any realtor association that want to have access to all the listings without paying the dues. And what are the thoughts behind that? Is there something that you can share with our agents about how is that going to work out as far as having two, I guess, scenarios? One, we all, as a member of National Association of Realtors and being realtors and non-realtors, how is that going to work? Are we going to see a scenario where anybody can have access, if they're licensed realtors, to a listing, whether they are a member of a local board or not?
So I don't have excuse me, I don't have a specific answer to that question yet. I do know that when the settlement was in the works, we provided a fairly comprehensive write-up about the different items in that settlement and what would need to change regarding like MLS access, some of the lockbox access, as well as the way that realtors sort and look at listings within an MLS. Obviously, all those changes are on hold, and our legal department did a really good video that's fairly short that I can share with you that might help better explain kind of where we are in that process. Something else you might want to be aware of, or we do have some interesting talking points that really help articulate the benefit of the MLS and how it fosters competition. And so I think as you know, as you're out talking to your networks, just trying to help really educate people about why our industry is competitive, why the MLS does work, why this sharing of listings through the MLS helps advantage the consumer. And I think those talking points are going to be really, really important as we help the industry inch forward through some of the changes that we're seeing right now. So I will go ahead, Hadi, or Sarah, actually, I can share those with you and you can send them out with my PowerPoint, I think would be helpful. And then once you read through all those resources, if you have follow-up questions, please let me know. Unfortunately, like I said to Hadi earlier, we are a little bit still in flux. So I don't have any specific answers yet, but we'll get there.
Right. No, I understand. And the other thing, so that we can encourage our realtors to participate and giving and getting involved with NAR. I know just in the last 12 months, you guys did a lot, especially during the COVID. And I know one of the most important things that we fought for was making the real estate agent independent contractors so they could apply for PPP. Can you kind of briefly just tell us a couple of the things that you guys have done behind the scene to support the realtors regarding that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've never seen such large relief packages like this go through Congress so quickly. Lawmakers acted really swiftly to try to prop up the economy during the pandemic. And so it was really important for us that any federal benefits that were being made available, that realtors, independent contractors would be eligible for. So that included, PPP loans, the SBA loans, as well as the unemployment insurance, which, traditionally is not available to independent contractors. And then on top of that, making sure that the real estate industry was protected. I mean, if they were going to have eviction moratorium in place for over a year, then those property managers still have to pay their mortgages. They still have to keep up those properties. And a lot of property managers are small, like mom and pop property managers who only own like 4 buildings. It isn't all like big corporations that own rental properties. So it was really important that we ensured that the rental assistance can go directly to the property manager who can apply on behalf of the renter. So that was a huge win for us as well. And then also that $25 billion for homeowners assistance to make sure that we can keep people in their homes and prevent foreclosures and blights in our community. We're also actively pushing for just enhanced like tax benefits so that when properties do turn over, that they go to owner investors, owner occupants, and not, being turned into rental properties. I think we've heard a buzz about, big swaths of homes being purchased by corporations and turning them into rental properties, and then that putting like additional pressure on the supply of especially affordable homes across the country. So there was a lot of things that we were able to do successfully. One other thing we were able to do, and I don't know what it was like in your state, but we did have some governors who would not designate real estate as an essential service during the pandemic. Yeah. And so we behind the scenes went to the Department of Homeland Security and got them to change what's called their CISA guidelines, CISA, to include real estate services as an essential service. So when governors were looking at those guidelines to determine who in their states should be considered essential during the pandemic, they could then see that real estate was on the list provided to them by the federal government. So we thought that was something else that we were able to do on the regulatory side that was really impactful during the pandemic.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah Robertson. Is there any questions in the chat box?
There's not any right now, but Sarah did share her email. So I guess if you guys have questions, you can reach out. And like she mentioned, I'll share her PowerPoint slides and then the video that she referenced as well in kind of our recap email.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I look forward to seeing you one of these days soon.
Great. Thanks, Hadi, and thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.
Take care.
All right, so up next, I want to introduce y'all